So this is quite a dramatic street scene where we have a real strong bright element and then some darker shadow elements all around that. So I've chosen this one because it is a little bit challenging. It is a little bit different from sort of, street scenes where normally you'll have one half in shadow and the other half in light or that kind of thing. So before we start the painting, which is going to be the really interesting bit of this process, we're going to do some sketching. Now, some of these parts of this image are so dark, I can't really see the detail in there. So there's going to be a little bit of making things up here. Now, one thing I want to talk about before we start is if you have a look at the image, you notice that because it's been shot on a wide angle lens, there's quite a lot of tapering perspective in that. Now, what I'm going to do when I sketch is often I don't like to leave that perspective in, because even though it's photorealistic in a sense, I think it can be a little bit distracting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and bring a little bit of that out and bring some of the vertical elements back to vertical, if you know what I mean. So the first thing I'm going to do with this image, and you can see this if I put the photo up, is I'm going to think about where the main vertical elements are. So on the right hand side we have put a few of those lines in. That's going to go there, and that area there, and then there's a lamppost, a plant pot, and that is about a third of the way across to the other side, which is probably about there. So I would say that edge. So this line that I'm putting in here is very much the sort of outside of these building areas. And the line is there just to add a little bit of interest and contrast to the sketch, but also just to try and help tell the story of the way things are in terms of what goes in front of what. And that's where these thicker lines are quite useful, particularly at this later stage of the drawing. They're a good indicator of hierarchy. Now, if you want some more videos that I've done on line thickness and why you would use line thickness in a sketch like this, I've just done some stuff on my YouTube channel and my Patreon, so you can check that out. Now, this style isn't to everyone's liking. A lot of people wouldn't bother with sort of extra lines in a lot of these areas, but I quite like it. So as you can see there, I started on this side and I worked my way up, and what I've done is I've picked up some of the ink on my hand and then moved it along there, and that's a really good example why you should always start here and work down if you're right-handed. So let that be a lesson to you young uns. So I'm just going to dry that with my hairdryer and we'll get painting. So let's look at the reference drawing and think, how are we going to paint this? Well, the first thing I would say is we've got blue sky. Let's keep it quite simple. Put a blue sky in. And then from there, it's really a case of doing one simple wash over the top. And now I'm not going to be too proud about even doing the blue sky separately. I'm just going to do it all in one. So you really have to think of this base layer as just a primary colour layer. Now, you can change that as you go, because obviously some of the primary areas you're going to have a different colour on the ground, a slightly different colour in the houses. So you can put that down really wherever you think you need it to be. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking the blue of the sky is going to be blue in our picture. The paving area at the bottom might be the next thing I put in. I'm going to use a natural sienna for that. I might build it up as we go. So on the right and left hand side, obviously we've got some high shadow areas, so I'm going to put a bit of blue in there. I'm going to also put a bit of the centre of the drawing, really, where the light areas are. I want to try and keep those quite light, and I might even put a tiny bit of like natural sienna or even some yellow in there, But it's quite a tricky one because some of the buildings are brick and some of them are white. So let's do a test of what that might look like. So if I get a little bit of natural sienna at the bottom, we'll start with that blue towards the front, and pick up some French ultramarine for that. So that's going to be a little bit like that, and add a bit of blue into that, and that knocks that back into a nice sort of grey, but it still has some interesting tones to it. And then I might do the same here, start with that, and then pull in some of this. And then we have those two buildings there. Now they look a bit dark already, but no, it's fine actually. There, basically, this is a very abstract, kind of messy version of what I'm trying to achieve. Now, looking at this, I can see there's a little bit of a continuity of colours, but as an initial drop-in colour, I think that works quite well. Now, this quinacridone rose here, you don't have to be quite as poppy with that. You could put in an orange instead, or like a potter's pink. I might be tempted to, let's see, that's a lot too strong. But that said, it just had a bit of interest, doesn't it? There. That's quite nice. So I'm using a French quill here, which is basically a medium mop brush. You could probably go for a bigger mop brush here, it doesn't really matter. And I'll take a little bit of cobalt blue. And I might not even go all the way up into the sky there. I might leave some slightly jaggedy areas. Okay, so then in the bottom here we have this area, which, as I said before, is I've gone with the natural sienna colour. Now this is a Monte Mito natural sienna, which is quite a yellowy one. Like, it's not too yellow ochre-y, if you know what I mean. But that mixed with a little bit of the blue is going to knock that back to a grey. So we'll do something like that. And straight away, it's just a bit more interesting than a flat wash. You can see that it's got a little bit more interest to it. And we've got that shadow running that way, so I might pull that down there. Okay, so up this side we have that transparent red oxide, and again this is going to have another layer or two on it, because again with a little bit of that blue, I'm not being afraid to just kind of splash that on there. And then on the other side we're going to do the same, because there's quite a lot of brick here, and again I'm not being subtle, and a little bit of that French ultramarine, and that is going to knock that back to a grey again, bit of a gradient, and then we're going to bring that back across, try and merge that in there. Take a little bit of that blue out, and then that can come down here. Now this is crunkling up, as you can see, because it's not been taped down or anything. Now I'll pick up a little bit more of that as we go. We've got the two white buildings there. I'm going to put a little bit of colour in these. And you'll notice I want to try and keep those to be slightly more. I might pick up a little of this quinacridone gold for that area. A bit of a dry brush. I don't want to merge in too much there, but we'll go for a slightly lighter colour. Leave a few little unpainted bits. It's quite nice. And then we're going to add in some more darkness here on the corner. No, you certainly don't have to cover every bit of it. You can do as much or as little as you want. So as you can see from the reference drawing, we've got this area over here, which is the light area, which is where the light is touching these buildings. And then it kind of, you get a light across there, but the whole of this foreground here is in shadow. And that's the kind of vibe we've got with this series of sort of simple washes. So what I'll do now is I'll use the hairdryer on that. We'll dry that off and we'll go from there. So that's that dried off, and as you can see, it's gone a little bit paler. The colours are a little bit more muted. So what we're going to be looking at now is doing the sort of first layer of shadow colour really on there. And there is some areas where we have some light areas around window frames, but we might not get too fussed about light window frames or stuff like that. We might keep this one a little bit simple. The sort of lighter areas. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint in the lighter areas of where there's light, if that makes sense. So I'll take a little bit of this transparent red oxide and I'm going to paint in. Right, so if you want to add in, I'll add in a little bit more blue to this as we go around the corner. Okay, as we get even further back, I mean, it does get darker in here, so we can add a little bit more blue in there just to take us to this area here. Go a little bit big with the paints. I don't want to be too fiddly. I want to try and be make it interesting, you know. Now, the sharp-eyed amongst you will notice that there is a few technical errors with this picture in terms of the houses and stuff like that, but I'm not too fussed about that really. I want to, like I said before from the off, this isn't a true representation of what's there by any means. This is a little bit more of an improv. So again, we're going to make this a tiny bit darker here. I might introduce a bit of the Van Dyke brown, which is going to help richen this whole area up here. I really want a bigger brush for this. I've just decided that one is far too small. And as this is a bit closer to the camera again, we can introduce a little bit of that blue just to make that a tiny bit darker. Take out that bit on that window. And then we can move across. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add in quite a lot more blue. Then we're going to just go across there. And that's going to take us to the bottom of there, and then we're going to reinstall this shadow colour. And that's going to go across there and across there to there. And that can come all the way down there. Now you can see that if you look in the reference drawing, you see that working all the way down there. And then again, we mix a bit more blue, and we're going to pull this down. And this is why a big brush is important for this, because you need to sometimes just get a lot of the paint down quick. So it's a hairdryer job that now, I think. Right, so I think that's the main body of it, kind of put in really. What I would add now is some detail really. So if you're looking again at, some shadow areas, again, I'm just going to put a few of those sort of details in. And windows, that's the other thing, is you might want to start sketching in some of those darker window areas. And that's really when the sketch really starts to come together, actually, I find. Again, I'm just choosing a bluey, a brown, and I'm not being too particular about angles. They're just getting sketched in. I think the thing about these sketches, these kind of sketches, is you want the looseness really of the painting to almost like match the looseness of the line work. So there is a bit of a balance. Now, it's different for everyone, and I'm not saying that everyone's going to look at this and think, what a masterpiece. But for me, there is a kind of, there's a sort of balance between line work and painting. There's a sort of relationship. So this window has got some reflections in from a building on the other side of the street, and I'm going to try and leave those. I think that's a nice way of trying to give it a little bit more life, particularly in the windows that are closest. And again, for the windows, I'm going for quite a blackish mixture of Van Dyke Brown and French ultramarine. So over here we have a lot of darkness. Darkness on darkness. So really, it's going to be quite a rich mix, this. And then, okay. And then what I might do is, just to try and get a bit of shape back into this block, is put that thick line in there. Because otherwise I think it can lose a bit of its form. Like that. Okay, so let's add in let's add back in some of these tiles. So it's always interesting whenever I do a tutorial and I think afterwards, what worked and what didn't work. And I think this one's actually quite a good example of where I think scale is important. I think this might have worked slightly better as a smaller drawing rather than a large one, but you live and learn. So there you go. That's a little bit. So there's an example of how you can deal with shadows in a watercolour. It's all about values. It's all about seeing where the lightness is and seeing where the darkness is, and putting those things in. Now, I've simplified this dramatically. I've kept just that area there as the light area and this area as the dark area. But I hope you can see how I built that up into shadows, and I've not ever just put down one single block of colour. I've not just said that's all grey. Every time I've gone in to put a shadow, I've thought about whether I want a bit more blue in there or a little bit of orange for the brickwork is. And so I hope you found that useful. It was a lot of fun.
So I do often say, when it comes to your art, if you don't know whether something's finished, pop it on the mantelpiece, pop it on a shelf somewhere, give it 48 hours, 24 hours, and have another look. Because when you come back with a fresh set of eyes, you're going to go, actually, that needs to be darker, that needs to be lighter. And, when you're in the process of working on a piece, it's very easy just to get a little bit entrenched. So this is a good example of that, where I left it for 24 hours and I came back and I thought, I need to put a bit more detail in some of these areas. They're looking super flat. The area on the floor with the bricks and things needs a little bit more detail. And again, looking at this, a couple of weeks later, I actually think the whole shadow overall on the front could be a little bit darker. It could be a little bit punchier. It's really one of the benefits of periodically going back and looking at your artwork, whether it's through sketchbooks or just loose artwork and just loose sheets, or even if you take a picture of every piece that you do and just keep it on your phone. If you're posting daily or weekly on Instagram, it's quite a good way of collating your work in a gallery where you can quickly flick back through, and you will spot things. You will go, well, I'm not sure that worked, or I'm not sure that worked. But that's the whole point of developing your style and trying new things. And if you're making decisions that ultimately, when you look back on, you think, well, maybe that wasn't so good, that means you're learning. You could argue that, mistakes are sort of learning nodes rather than, pitfalls. And ultimately, it's only paper, so there's no need to get stressed. So I hope you like this one. I think it needs another layer, actually, weirdly, like I said before, but it was super fun to do. The only other thing I would say about this one is it's another example of really where there's no place for black in pictures. I think it all the time. I know it in my heart of hearts, but does it stop me putting it in? No, I'm always colouring stuff in black. But actually, it just becomes a hole in a picture, so really try and avoid those completely black values. I should know better. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed this one. It's been a long video, so if you stay to the end, then you get bonus prizes. If you want longer videos, obviously, check out my Patreon. All the details are knocking about somewhere, so have a look at that. And yeah, we'll see you again next time.
Cheers then. Have a good one. Bye.